Hello and welcome to the fourth day of this Fatherhood Summit. I have been honored to talk to some really awesome guests and people who have been extremely encouraging and helping us to understand how important fatherhood is to families. We have talked about a couple of different subjects already, including faith and fatherhood, and what does that look like. We've also talked about marriage and the steps men need to take in order to make their marriage better. As men, we have this awesome responsibility to our children to treat our wives with respect and to honor her and to lead by servant leadership instead of just leading with an iron fist. We've also had the chance to talk a lot yesterday about leadership, and we had a great chance to talk to Aaron Walker earlier today about this idea of mindset. And as a dad, we need to get into the right mindset to instill those values into our children. And man, we are in for a treat now. We have one of my friends, Teresa McCloy, on the phone and on video, and we're going to be talking to her about personality style. So Teresa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Matt. I've been looking forward to this all week long. And I have to say, I'm just, you're inviting women into the conversation, even though we're talking about fatherhood. And I love that. And I know you've got another friend of mine coming on later. I think it's ironic that both of us are talking about personalities. So you have two women sharing about personalities. So how fun is that?
It's awesome. I think so many times we forget, especially as men, to look at things from different perspectives. We forget to look and see what it is that our wives are going through. And so I think it is essential not only to talk to men, of course, about fatherhood and how to be better, how to get better as far as marriage and be better dads, but I also think it's awesome to talk to women and get their point of view, not only to get their point of view, but to get some experts on here talking about different personality styles.
Well, thank you. It's a subject that I love to talk about and been married for 36 years. So have a few years of experience even in what my husband and I have gone through in discovering our different ways of seeing the world. I call it, the glasses that we wear, the lens that we look through. And it took us a long time we're slow learners, to figure that out and to be able to really appreciate each other's strengths and weaknesses. So I'm ready to dive in.
Well, with that thought, Teresa, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in other people's personality differences.
Sure. My background originally started as entrepreneurial, and so I owned several businesses. Actually, it was even a part of my personality, like finding what was my strengths and what I like to do best. And because of my personality, I did a lot of searching to find that. And so early on, that was a lot of my story. And then I spent about 20 years in full-time ministry on a church staff as a creative arts director, working with music and production and all of that type of thing. And then about 3.5 years ago, I stepped back out into an entrepreneurial space and kind of began the journey into coaching and the process that I've created to really help people with time management. And entrepreneurs, creators, and leaders is who I serve. But this personality part comes in as, I think if we know ourselves well, I call it our real self, and we have this best self-awareness, then we can really live our best life and do our best work. But if we really are identified by our work, which is what I always try to do, I didn't take the time to really get to know my strengths, my weaknesses, what I needed to develop and work on psychologically and spiritually. I was always trying to lead from who I was as in what I did, what my work was. And so I flipped that around and really want to help people know themselves well. And that's where that personality styles. I work with a tool called the Enneagram. And it's become really popular in the past few years. It's a deep psychological and spiritual tool that you can use to really get to know your coping behaviors, your strengths, your weaknesses, and really dive in. So it's been huge in our marriage and me understanding our children. So
That's great. I absolutely love that. So, as you mentioned, you specialize in the Enneagram, which, as you
Mhm.
said, helps people to better understand your own personality along with your family members. How has understanding this information improved your relationship with your husband and with your kids?
So, without getting too deep and too crazy into the Enneagram, but yet giving you some basics so it'll make sense. The Enneagram, if you picture it, it's drawn in a circle, and there are 9 different types around the side. And so we have these 3 centers of intelligence, 3 types in each center. So there's the body center, there's the heart center, and there's the intellectual center. So you are one of those types. We can take an assessment. You can learn it through talking with a coach or different things. And once you know your type, you know what center of intelligence or gut center or heart center you might be in. For example, my husband is a type 9. So he is in the body center, and he's a peacemaker by nature. That's what would describe him. I am in the heart center. I'm a type 3. I'm a performer or effective and efficient by nature. And so knowing those 2 things about ourselves has made a huge difference because as you can imagine, a peacemaker really isn't going to love to do conflict. So they really want to keep the peace at all cost. And a performer or an effective and efficient person is looking for the fastest way that we can get to the solution. So you can see where those 2 things start to collide pretty quickly in a marriage relationship. But us knowing about each other allows us to approach station differently. I know, I need to give Dale a little bit more time to process, give him some warning. I can't poke the bear. I'm sure you've heard that statement before. I can't poke him to get him awake and to kind of get him to show up in the conversation. If I do that, he's going to go to anger, which is the root behavior of the body centers. And I go to shame. So, in the heart center, I feel like, I get this shameful feeling. So he has to approach me differently, not coming in that fatherly way to, you should have done this, because then I take on shame. So that communication is really helpful as we look at that as well. And the same thing with our children.
So, how has understanding those strengths and weaknesses really helped improve your marriage from before you started diving into personality styles? You said you started diving into the personality styles within the last couple of years. How has understanding this really improved your relationship, other than understanding, poking the bear and
Yeah. Yeah. One of the beautiful things I love about the tool of the Enneagram is it really allows you to give each other grace. And so I'm not looking anymore to judge him as being right and wrong. And I'm also not looking to fix him. And so many times in our marriages, we're trying to, or even with our children or friendships even, we're trying to fix another person. If they would just be more like me, if they would just think more like me. And the beauty is, from a faith-based perspective, I believe that God has created us all to bring a part of himself to the world, right? And so from that, whether, type 1 brings goodness, type 2 brings love, type 3 brings this effective and efficient, type 4, creativity, 5 is wisdom, 6 is loyalty and faithfulness, 7 is joy, 8 is power, and 9 is peace. Those are all beautiful characteristics of our Creator. And so I have to know that this is who my husband Dale is at his best self. He brings peace. That's his gift to the world. And if I try to change that, or he tries to change my ability to see things in systems and processes and creative ways of being effective and efficient, then we're really holding each other down instead of raising each other up. So knowing our spouse and our children's gift to the world and strength can really be an encouragement then of going, no, this is what he brings into our marriage as well.
I absolutely love that. And as a couple, my wife and I have taken the Enneagram,
You
actually
have.
for you, Teresa, and
Mhm.
I loved it because it shared those strengths and the weaknesses that you're talking about. And because of that, I understand that there are certain things I can do to lift my wife up, to
Mhm.
encourage her, to uplift her. And
Mhm.
these strengths and the weaknesses, they're not there to put your wife, your spouse down, but instead it gives you the opportunity to lift them up, to encourage them, to uplift them, to let them know how special they are and what they were, maybe created for. And so I absolutely I love that.
Well, and the other thing I think, Matt, that is important is, you know, we're lifting them up and we're knowing them, but it gives us a common language. So it doesn't matter if it's the Enneagram or the DISC or Myers-Briggs or Strength Finders, they're all just tools, right? And we can learn a little bit from each of them and dive deeper into the one that kind of really resonates with us in these personality assessments and styles. But what's great is it gives us a common language. And so, and I believe with the Enneagram, it gives us an opportunity for growth, not just for transformational growth. So I can work at not only being a great type 3, but I can move over and connect to my intellectual space and to my body space. And Dale can as well. And then we're actually encouraging each other to grow. But we have this common language. That we can, come together around and go, you know what, right now you're really kind of, you're avoiding the conflict. And he knows I'm not criticizing him when I say that. I'm just, and he can say to me, hey, you're pushing me a little bit to move a little too quickly. Like I'm not ready to go there yet. So we can have a common language that takes kind of that fire out of those conversations that get a little difficult.
That's great. And I know some of the guys who are probably watching this video, and whether it's live or whether they're watching it in the near future, are probably thinking to themselves, wow, the Enneagram then sounds a lot like the 5 love languages. It's
It can.
understanding and being able to communicate better with your spouse.
Mm-hmm. It can. And so when kind of, like I said, in the body center, those types kind of go to anger. They're either overexpressing it sometimes or they're repressing it. And the heart types, the same thing. We either overlove or we kind of check out from our emotions. And in the head types, those 3 types can overthink things or hoard that information and not share it. So it does have some similarities. It has similarities with the DISC, Myers-Briggs. They all kind of overlap with similar things. I think what's really important in relationships, though, is to continue the journey together to growth. Don't get stagnant. Don't get stagnant in your marriage relationship and in learning about each other. I don't know how long you've been married or any of that history. We known each other a while, but I don't know your, relationship history. Dale and I got married very young, early 20s. We're now 57 and 60. He, the older one, by the way. And, we've evolved and changed in those 36 years. But if we wouldn't have done the work, and it is work to keep your marriage strong, if we wouldn't have done the work along the way, my mom's quote used to be, you'll have good years and bad years in your marriage. And I think that is true. Sometimes we think, well, we've had a bad month, something's wrong. No, there's ebb and flow to a long-term relationship. You're not the same person you were when you and your wife first got married. I'm definitely not the same person. Praise God, I'm not the same person. I was pretty immature at that point in time. So I think tools like personality styles can give us a platform and kind of some rails to run on as we go through those difficult times and really do the work that each spouse needs to do to continue to grow them together.
I absolutely love that, and I completely agree. My wife and I will have been married 11 years, actually in 2 days.
Congratulations.
Thank you. On the last day of this summit, I get to go and profusely thank her for the support and encouragement that she's given me, and watching the kids while I'm on the evening sessions.
Absolutely.
So
Dinner out is probably in the making, I bet.
yeah, if I can find
If
someone to
not, I
watch
just
it.
suggested it on your live Zoom call. So
She's going to watch this later and go, "Oh, that's why."
yeah, I'm trying brownie points with your wife here.
She already loves you, and
Oh my.
so. So in your studies and personalities and seeing different marriages and in your coaching practice and different things, and we all know there's a lot of differences between the male and the female mind. What
Absolutely.
are some of the differences that you have found, and how can those differences, understanding those differences, improve the quality of marriage?
Well, within the tool that I use of the Enneagram, when I talk about something like, well, type 2 is love and type 8 is power, people could automatically assume, well, then, a lot of guys are probably type 8s and a lot of women are type 2s. And that's absolutely not true. So just to put that out there. So within the tool of the Enneagram, the male female ratio doesn't show up that one type is more than this, because I've met some of the most beautiful type 2 Enneagrams, and they're wonderful men who are very loving. Love doesn't necessarily mean, weak or, not bringing, all of that manly stuff to the table. It just means that's the way they nurture and take care of the relationships that they have. And that's the way they approach life, is through a lens of love. And so I don't find in the Enneagram that there's a male and female difference or that type of thing. Now, that being said, yes, men and women definitely are wired differently. We need to be wired differently to do different things in a relationship. As we come together in marriage, we have different roles that we play and different ways of thinking things. Men are kind of, if we think of a computer in technology, and you may have heard this, men open one window and they close it and open another window, and women can have, 25 windows open in their mind at the same time and be really pretty organized with all of them. It's just the way we were wired, again, by our creator, to be able to do that. Whereas, in a man's mind, that is too many things. It's much more compartmentalized. And I think that's important in communication to remember, no matter what our personality styles are. We've all heard the amount of words that a woman needs to use in a day and the amount of words that a man needs to use in a day are far less. And so just knowing that and being aware of it and having those conversations makes all the difference in just the awareness of how we are different. And I think we're responsible as both men and women to do our due diligence to learn that information. If we're going to be married, we need to study what makes a good marriage. We need to learn about it. We may not have had that modeled in our homes. We may not have had a mom and a dad both in our home when we were growing up. And so to have a healthy marriage, we're going to have to hang out with people who have one, like this summit. We're going to have to learn how to be good fathers and good mothers. And it's our due diligence to take our responsibility to make that happen.
Completely agree. I think once we understand that, somebody asked me a question one time, and I would love to hear your response to this, Teresa, is that they asked me, did God create man and woman equal? And after some thought, I looked at the person, and I won't do any name dropping or anything like that, but I looked at them and I said, yes and no. And their reply was, how can you have both answers? I said, well, here's the thing is, if you look at two people and you look at the importance of both people, God created both people to be just as important as the other one. just as important in their spouse. If we don't have 100%, and somebody mentioned this earlier, if we don't have 100% from both spouses, that's when marriages fail.
Mm-hmm.
However, I do believe that God created both man and woman different. And what that means, the phenomenal thing about that, and it's not a discouragement, it's not a throwaway, but it's an incredible encouragement, because when you look at the man and the woman, and you look at them psychology and psychologically, my wife and I are completely different, and that's a good thing. My wife can do things that I'll never be able to, but we have 3 kids. We can start with the easy one. That's something that I can't do. I cannot, through my life, give life.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that, a man cannot do. And there's gifts that my wife and I both have that the other person doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Dave Ramsey talks about this free spirit, and I'm definitely the free spirit, and
Mm-hmm.
she's the more controlled, natured person.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that difference. Would love to
Mm-hmm.
hear your thoughts.
And there's so many layers to that, right? We have, and I don't love the word roles, because that sounds like, we have this role and that role, but there are ways that we are gifted differently. And some of that doesn't have anything to do with our personality. It's anatomy, it's makeup. In the Enneagram, and where we're working with the Enneagram, we talk about there's 3 ways that our ego is formed. And so, and brain science and research is amazing right now in even how early that our egos are formed in our life. They're saying now maybe before the age of 2, we begin to form some of this ego structure. And within the Enneagram, how I teach it is 1/3 of that is nature, right? The genes that were put together by the 2 people that created us, that's nature. It's a gift to us. 1/3 of it is nurture. It's the environment that we grew up in and how we were nurtured. And then 1/3 of it becomes our own free will. And we make choices throughout our life that form our ego. And I love that picture of 1/3 and 1/3, because, we can't go back and redo how we were nurtured as men and women. And we can't go back and redo that. We can't go back and sometimes redo some of our free will, but we can become self-aware of where we are now currently and grow from there. And so men and women do that differently even. Many times, the woman is the one out seeking to find things and know things, and is a fixer by nature, and wants to bring, I don't know if your wife's ever done this to you, and maybe it's more your nature to do this, but I remember, I love Ian Cron's book, The Road Back to You, which is a great Enneagram book. And I remember bringing it home and kind of putting it by Dale's chair, like, love for you to read this if we kind of by nature of like suggest things and things like that. But I do believe that we are equal. I love your answer to that, Matt. We're equal, but we're different. And by God's design, we are different. And it's a beautiful thing. It really is. It's hard work, but it's just like our children are all different, right? As you're raising 3 young girls, each of them have a different personality. And just think about that 3rd nature, 3rd nurture. You're in the beginning stages of forming through your nurturing and through your nature what their ecosystems and what their ego structures are going to look like. And that's a huge responsibility. We don't have full control over that, but we have a lot of input, by God's grace into our children and the shaping of who they are.
I love that answer, and there's so many tidbits that I want to. I just want to take from that and just pick your brain about. But we'll start with we'll continue the marriage conversation. So, what are some of the best steps that you have taken personally, you and your husband Dale? What are some of the best steps that you guys have taken to develop and improve your guys' marriage?
There's lots of things. But one of them that we really, I mean, these are just some practical, I'll just give you some practical things that are pretty doable and a part of even what I talk about in the real life process. One of them is we try to get away on a regular basis. So, especially if you have small children, and I know it's a budget thing many times, but most of the time as our kids were growing up, we would take 24 to 48 hours feels like a really long time. And sometimes the family gets in this thing of, let's take this big long 2-week or 10-day vacation. And at least the way Dale and I were wired, that was harder for us. We live on a farm in central Illinois, and so we only have certain times of the year that we can even get away. So it was easier to get away for an overnight, for a couple of nights away, just the two of us, even to find childcare and that type of thing, than to go, let's take the kids and go for 10 days or whatever. So that was one thing, is we invested in each other. It was not always easy. And sometimes I really had to push to get that time. But as you and I both know, once you step out of the normal routine, I always said a couple hours down the road, we both kind of relaxed, it's like, okay, we got some time together. So that we've been pretty consistent to have those date nights, which we all talk about, but there is something about sitting face to face across the table from one another, having a conversation, lingering over the meals. So I don't recommend fast food. It's not healthy anyway. There is also, early on, put the kids to bed early, order pizza, do whatever, you can have a date night at home. You don't have to be, spending great amounts of money or getting childcare, but there is something though about changing environment that helps for good conversation. So I think, and again, you mentioned love languages earlier. I would definitely recommend finding out what your spouse's love language is. So for me, it's words of affirmation and quality time. For Dale, it's acts of service. So this sounds crazy, but if I will go out and hop on a tractor for a few hours during planting season, that speaks more love to Dale than almost anything I could ever do, because it's coming alongside him. And for a man, they're very much identified, at least, and this may be generalizing, but by the work that they do. I mean, just are. And so to come alongside him in his work and support him, that's an act of service. And I have to put aside my ego, that my work is more important than his work, and do that give and take and go, no, this is a busy time of year for him. How can I support? Just like your wife is doing as you're doing this summit this week, right? It's give and take. And that's probably, I think, one of the hardest things for us to learn early on in our marriage, is to set aside our own egos and our own desires and say, no, I love my spouse enough to put my personality aside and to understand theirs and to come alongside them.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. It's kind of, I'm kind of sitting here and laughing as you're talking, because my wife and I are almost the exact opposite. Her love language is acts of service, and mine is words of affirmation, and just getting those, understanding how we can fill each other's cup. And I mean, that's really what the Enneagram is about, the DISC, the Myers-Briggs, the love language is how do we fill each other's cup? And so along with that idea, and thinking about children, what are some of the best ways, and I'm going to pick on girls a little bit because I've got 3 girls, as a dad, when we're looking at our young girls, what are some of the best ways that we can raise them, that we can encourage them, that we can implement value into them and let them know how awesome they are, how that they were created great and unique?
No, that's a great question. So early on, I'll share this story with you. Early on, one of my entrepreneurial businesses was I taught a preschool program for little kids in music called Kinder Music. And that program, I ran it out of my home. I had about 75 students I also taught piano and voice. So I had a lot of children in my home off and on for several years. And it was always the kinder music program was a program where the parent would be in the class with the child and do, physical activities with sticks and blocks and all this type of thing. But what was always so fun was to see a dad come with their daughter, and just to see the bond that would be created by dad getting down on the floor, crisscross applesauce legs, and their daughter climbing in their lap, and them engaging in an activity together. And it was so neat because for many men, something physical or using their body, helps them interact, that wrestling with fatherhood, it's that wrestle, that dive in place. And so that gave a guy an opportunity. And he was always a little embarrassed the first time he come to class, like, oh, here I am doing this parent thing and my wife wants me to bring her and all that. And then by the second or third time, he's like looking forward to it because it gave an opportunity for physical touch. It gave an opportunity for interaction, something in common that they could talk to their daughters or their sons about, so I just always remember those moments of just those fathers interacting with their children in that way. So find what your child loves. It's not always sports. It might be theater. It might be reading. It might be music. Whatever it is that you can engage with them in. It might be discovering a hobby together, something that you like to do. And it might not be your thing. And that's okay. It's learning to support them in their thing and encouraging them in their strengths. I don't believe that we can type children into a personality too young. And I think we have to be very careful of the way we choose words. Well, they're always this, they're always this. They're just a difficult child. We say things like that in front of our children. Guess what they begin to believe? They're a difficult child. And I made a lot of those mistakes along the way. I'll be honest with you to say both of our children were adopted and they're 10 years apart. And so our son, Eric, who unfortunately, and I know you know the story, Matt, but our son, Eric, passed away from drug addiction about 1.5 years ago. Difficult child. I won't lie and say that he was not, but I really had to watch not saying that in front of him. He had a lot of learning disabilities and some different things that he really struggled with. So to bring him up and to encourage him in his strengths was important. And the same thing with our daughter. They're 10 years apart. So I kind of did the young parent and the old parent thing. Our daughter's 22. And, she is a type 5 on the Enneagram. And so she's very much in her head. And I used to see her come home in high school and I thought, oh my gosh, she must be depressed. She doesn't want to be around people. She's not hanging out with her friends. Wasn't that at all. Her personality was forming. And as a type 5, she had to process all that had happened at school all day because she's a thinker. And then she was able to process the emotion that happened around it later. And I know that sounds weird and kind of technical, but that's just the way a type 5 kind of sees the world. I go and I experience it, and then I come home and do the emotional part. And I was like, what happened at school today? Are you okay? All this stuff. And that just was overwhelming. So you can begin to know your children, but I think we have to be careful early on in younger years. So we can't over encourage or over love your girls. You're never going to over love them, and find that commonality that you can have with each of them individually. Individual daughter dates are a great thing or son dates, either one.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Before I jumped on this summit session, and between my last one and this one, my girls were like, "Daddy, can we wrestle? Can we play around? Can we jump on you? Can we use your personal jungle gym?" And I love that, because that is that quality time that is going to instill value, and it's going to instill you were created for a purpose. I love you. Daddy loves you. And no matter what comes up in life, you're going to be knocked down and different things, but you can continue to understand how valuable that you are.
And I think too, one thing that we did well, even for our son who struggled with difficulty of, ADHD, had some other things going on. Structure is so important for children. And sometimes that's hard for us depending on our personality style. So there are certain types within the Enneagram that structure is not their thing. But it is so important, I think, for children to have consistency and structure. And what I call rhythms and routines. We're recording this right before the Christmas holiday. And I'm always kind of amazed that our son, when he was still living, and our daughter both, the rituals that they remember and the traditions from holidays. And those are great memories for them. Some of them funny because, something went wrong or didn't work out. But the consistency of the way we did things, even though we didn't even know we were creating those consistencies, that became kind of your family's own little story. And I love when I hear families share stories of how they do life together, and it's kind of their unique little personal secret code, so to speak, of how they do things. And I think those things really carry into our adulthood when we can create those beautiful memories and those rituals and routines. Reading a story at night. We have a thing at Christmas that my daughter still calls the candle story. And it is the Advent candle and reading this little children's book. So she's 22 and probably wouldn't love that I'm saying she still calls it the candle story. But, those are the things that really go into a child's nurture and nature as beautiful memories. And you can create those all different ways. They don't have to be super structured, but just creating those beautiful spaces where they feel safe is amazing. So.
Completely agree. That is, some great stories, some great memories, and as at 34 years old, there's different rituals and memories that I know my family would do, and the way we would unwrap presents at Christmas, the way we would have a candlelight service on Christmas Eve, and creating those memories is definitely a essential.
Yeah. So, and, they're different for every family, right? I know when Ashley comes on and you guys are talking, Ashley's the, travel girl who her family's, in the travel trailer, doing the thing. And that's memories though. So there's no right or wrong way to create that structure and those memories and that beauty for your children. It's not, we happen to live on a farm in central Illinois, so our kids knew how to do chores and, do different things, but there's no right or wrong to your family structure and to the way you develop out your personalities in that framework. It's the consistency and the safety that we're creating for our children. Even though our son struggled with some really difficult things, and many parents have that difficult child, there was always safety, and he always knew that he could trust that safety. And that is what you can provide for children, even as they struggle with their own difficult development.
That is definitely true. And I'll have to have you on at a different time for my podcast, and we can talk a little bit more about the memories and some of the different.
Yeah, I'd love to.
You guys have faced. So as we start wrapping up here, what are some of the best ways that you have found to develop yourself personally, and what are some of the best ways that you've implemented into your children so that they can continue to develop?
Well, I think offer opportunities for kids to have unique experiences, and depending on, it doesn't have to cost a lot of money, but put them in places where they can have great conversations with adults and really give them the opportunity to be, outside of technology and have experiences, because we're going to spend so much more of our time face to face with people. Even on a Zoom call, I consider this face to face, right? We have to have, they're going to use technology maybe differently, but just learning how to be with people, having great conversations with them of, doing the coaching questions with our kids. So what'd you learn from that? What'd you hear him say? What did she say that you noticed? In the Enneagram, we talk about the head, the heart, and the gut. So I'll even point out to my kids early on, like, so what'd you see about their body language? What were they, we can teach our kids so much through observing human nature. And so that and, reading, exposing them to those types of things, and for our own self. I'm a huge believer in we're lifelong learners. And my husband and I learn differently as a type 9 and a type 3. And so, he learns in a different way than I do. And so giving grace to each other's learning styles and how you take in information, but challenging each other to continue to learn and develop. And maybe it's something that you even do together. My husband and I like to do hobbies together, golf and watch college basketball and, different things. Create those things that we do together are important as well.
And very, very true. Thank you, Teresa, for giving us a lot of great nuggets to think about.
Yes.
And being vulnerable. I really appreciate that. And I love and I respect you for not allowing a tragedy and some struggles in your life to stop you from where you're at, and to continue pushing that passion. And again,
no, it created and refined me. I always say that the gift of sometimes crisis and family crisis is that ability, if you're willing to embrace it and walk through it with your faith, is how it does refine you and shape you. And so, as tragic as are, they also be a blessing in your life and in your marriage.
Yeah, definitely. So wrapping up here, tell everyone a little bit about your business and what is the best way to contact you?
Sure, I would love to. So my business is called The Real Life Process. And so once, we work with these tools of the personality, I really work with entrepreneurs, creators, and leaders to figure out what to work on in 90-day processes to move their business forward and to build their businesses. And so online courses, coaching, a little bit of everything. TeresaMcCloy.com is my my website. So TeresaMcCloy.com. And also on Facebook, I have a free Facebook group. Go to the Real Life Process Tribe. We have a lot of great conversation there about the Enneagram, about the real life process, the 5 steps that we have. It's a 90-day process that can help you move forward in your business the way you were designed and you were created, not creating something that somebody else has designed, but you get to create your own process. So that's the way we can connect. Thank you for that.
That is awesome. Teresa, thank you for the work that you're doing, and please keep up the good work. I was talking to another common friend of ours, and they said you were absolutely amazing, and I would definitely agree.
Thank you. Thank you.
For helping people, and I absolutely love that.
Thank you. I hope Matt and I aren't that far apart, so sometimes we get to see each other face to face when he's driving through town. So hopefully we'll catch up again soon. And thank you, Scott, for being on the back end of things.
You're welcome. I was dropping links in Facebook for everybody, so hopefully they saw them over there.
Good. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. So definitely check out Teresa's website and learn a little bit more about what she's all about. Contact her. As you can hear it in her voice. She has a passion for helping people understand the gifts that they were created to do. Also, if you would like more information about wrestling with fatherhood, check out our website at www.fatherhood.com. Again, that's www.fatherhood.com. Also, check out our podcast. We've had some amazing guests. We're continuously adding some amazing guests. I'm sure Teresa will be on there very soon. And thank you guys so much for watching. Here in about 10 minutes, we will be jumping back on with Ashley. So I hope you guys all have a wonderful day.